Well, good evening, everyone. Nice to see everyone.
Sorry about that. I was just perusing the bylaws on the quorum.
It's all right, Ed. You always check out the bylaws, Ed. Thank you.
Sure.
This is the new cohort. The new co-chairs are here. The new trio. Welcome, Rebecca. Great to see you tonight.
All right.
Ed's in the house.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. We're up to 12 folks already. Do you want to give it another 2 minutes, maybe, just to see if we get anybody else in line?
Yeah, another minute. Might as well.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Let's live a little. I know there are other committees with more members, more volume perhaps, but I think this is the most important committee. I'm not afraid to say it.
I agree, but maybe I'm also a little biased.
I'm not going to add anything to that. You just believe what you want. That's all I'm going to say.
I will apologize in advance. There could be a furry co-chair popping up at some point. My dog is asleep on my lap, so apologies in advance.
No objection whatsoever. Totally understandable.
All right.
Thumbs up from Wendy as well. That's great.
All right.
All right. You want to get started, guys?
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's kick it off.
All right. Ed, do you want to welcome everybody? I'll give the floor to Ed.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Welcome, everybody, to the March 3rd, 2022 Housing Committee meeting. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Rebecca Lamort, Greg Morris, my co-chairs. My name's Ed Hartzog. If this is your first time here with us, welcome, welcome. See familiar faces, names in the chat on the participant list. Very excited to see everyone. Looking forward to being in person soon with everyone. I will turn it over to, before we get started, I'll turn it over to Zach. Yes, Zachary, to give us the lay of the land, so to speak, the rules of the road. If this is your first Zoom meeting with us on Community Board 8.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us, everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the committee co-chairs and the presenters. Following the presentation, co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon, pressing raise hand, not the wave or thumbs up buttons, and only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you have an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participant section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support.
Thanks, Ed. That's great. I will throw it over to my able co-chairs, Greg and Rebecca, to kick us off for this month's topic, but I will just quickly say that NYCHA is front and center for this month's discussion, as it is frequently a hot topic. And I'll just quickly say, as a quick aside, that our presenter on this topic is someone who knows the issue very, very well. And Greg, Rebecca, I will throw it back to you all to take it from here.
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in and go through the slides. I think I've got some really interesting information to share. But before we do, Rebecca, anything you want to say to your first meeting? Welcome. We're thrilled to have you. Is there anything you want to say to the body before we get started here?
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Ed and Greg, for having me as your co-chair. And I just look forward to all the great work we're going to do. Housing's the #1 need here. Public housing is something that we don't focus on enough in our community. So I'm just happy to be here and lend a voice to housing issues that we haven't focused on too much yet. So I'm really excited. Thank you.
Awesome. So if it's okay with everybody, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share, and Zachary, I'd like to share my screen.
Yeah,
if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some data specific to the New York City Housing Authority. And the reason for that is because we've had some conversations in this group about key aspects and topics of things that the Housing Committee would take on and get engaged with this year in 2022. And I think one of the things that universally we were clear about is engagement in thinking about and supporting the residents of public housing in the community district. And so I thought it would be beneficial today to see some things by the numbers. And this is not an hour-long presentation, just some key pieces of data specific to the New York City Housing Authority. And then sort of at the end of that, I think it would be beneficial to talk a little bit about what we know and what we'd like to know about public housing, and then think about what we could try to do next. And on that note, I want to mention that I want to thank in advance Sandrea. She and I talked earlier this week, and we think that there might be a great plan next month to get some residents of the public housing in our district to come out and be part of a conversation with us. I think that does a lot of things. I think that makes this community board engaged in a way that sometimes I think is a challenge for us. But I think the reality is, if we're going to address affordable housing needs, if we're going to meet the needs and support residents, we're going to have to do a lot of work, and we're going to have to build on what's here. And let me just note this again, and I said this before folks started to jump on. This committee might be not the biggest committee of all the committees of the community board, but I think the work that we are talking about and the work we have planned is the most essential. So I think we really do hope to see other folks' involvement as we go forward. So on that note, I'm going to share my screen. Zachary, is that okay?
Yep, you're able to share your screen now.
Awesome. And I'm just going to run through some very specific slides related to New York City Housing Authority, specifically the developments within our district. And it is Isaacs, Holmes, and Robbins Plaza are the three developments that we'll be talking about. Okay, if you can see my screen, can you give me a thumbs up just to make sure that the screen is okay? Beautiful, thank you so much. Okay, so it's a part one of potentially two, I hope, but here's some key data points. And there's going to be some references in this to the Holmes Isaacs Coalition. And Sandrea, at some point, if you want to weigh in on that, I'm going to ask you to, because I know that is front and center in your mind. But let's just sort of lay out some of the detail here. So let's be clear about what's there and what's in our district. So there are three developments, as I noted. The Holmes Towers the Holmes Towers. You can see the location here, 92nd and 1st. Two 25-story towers, 537 apartments. Oops, hold on a second. There you go. And then you've got the Isaacs houses located on the northern side of that particular development, which is between 93rd and 95th. Three 24-story buildings containing 635 apartments. Now, this is the most recent data that I could find. These numbers may be slightly off depending on how you see them, okay? And you also have Robbins Plaza, the Robbins Plaza building at East 70th, 150 units designated for seniors. Now, what you should know, and this has been communicated in a variety of ways over the course of time, the reality is when the federal government did a ranking of these three Upper East Side public housing buildings, they were noted as some of the worst in the United States. It is not, and let's be clear about this language, this is about the physical buildings themselves. Oftentimes this language gets interpreted in the wrong way. This is not about anything related to the community. It's about the physical buildings themselves. HUD ranked Holmes Towers, Isaacs Houses, Robbins Plaza, 25 points out of a maximum of 100 as related to quality inspections. And I'm going to show you a little data on that just so you can see what some of the issues and challenges are. Now, what's interesting to note is that these number scores sort of change over time periods. So during the course of this particular inspection time period, the points were very low, but if you look at the year before that, the points in terms of the inspection were higher. If you look at after that, the number are higher. So there's some feeling that perhaps there is some faulty data somewhere along the way in terms of what's really happening in this particular development. So in other words, you see some scores go one direction, then you see them fall off the map, you see them bounce back in a year. And I think residents of the development will tell you they haven't necessarily seen things come back better. Some specific data, when you see Stanley Isaacs Public Housing, this encompasses all three of these units, Isaacs, Homes, as well as Robbins Plaza. So you're talking about 2,325 residents, you're talking about 1,322 HUD units. You can see the demographic information there. I'll highlight one note, which is 47% head of household is over the age of 62 in these developments, 70% making below 30% of AMI. Now let's play the game of inspection results. Recent inspection results. According to data published by HUD, the most recent inspection for Isaacs in September 2018, passing score. Look at that, amazing. Look at that score, 79 out of 100. The difference between this property's lowest and highest inspection score from 2013 to 2019 is more than 20 points, which, as you can see, raises questions about the reliability of inspections. And here is what that looks like over the course of time. So if you look at these inspections, 4 physical inspections between 2013 and 2019 of these buildings, there's a score of 76 in 2013, and 86 in 2015, drops down to 25 in 2017, and then back up to 79 in 2018. Again, flagging that as saying, how is it possible you could go from one set of scores down to a lower set of scores, back up to a higher set of scores over the course of that time period? This is ProPublica sort of saying, this doesn't seem right. Something's not okay here. So I think what that is reflective of is that things weren't fixed, but perhaps there was something happened to try to elevate the scores very quickly, because being designated as one of the worst developments related to a physical space, and then suddenly magically being bumped up to somehow a passing grade seems like a pretty significant and drastic change. And I don't think residents would buy that. And here's how we know that. Actually, let me just give you the sense of the backup for 1 second. In 2017, this is what the scoring was. This is the actual data from the HUD report. So just so you know, just backing up to that 2017 score date. If you look at this, if you look at the left-hand side, you see possible points related to some of the specific elements and areas within these developments, and the final points, right? So possible points being one, and then you see the deductions, right? Exterior building systems across the board. Possible points for building systems, that's your plumbing, that's your boilers. Look at that, possible points 21, and the scoring is 5. That's a huge concern. Look at the site, possible points 16, final points 0, because of all the different deductions that they're seeing. And actually in the HUD report, you can see all the different ways in which there were deductions. So again, this is reflective of that lowest score period, that 25 points in 2017. So is it possible that the developments bounced back as quickly as they did? Well, I'm going to bounce back to that for a second. So I'm just going to tell you a recent story, if that's okay. Based on the data, and again, full transparency, I have served as executive director of the Isaacs Center, which operates a community center within the Isaacs Homes Public Housing Development. Based on the data that we have received over time, this is just a snapshot of what we've seen as it relates to Isaacs, Homes, and Robbins Plaza. Okay, and this is recent. This is from the last calendar year. That open tickets, what that means is, if I'm a resident, I open up a ticket to get something, a work order done to fix something in my building. It could be a variety of different problems in my building space, my exterior, my space, my apartment, or outside of my building space. This is just what we happen to know based on some data we've received over the last year. And that is, if you look left to right, the number of open tickets meaning tickets that were, someone communicates a problem to NYCHA and says, I have an issue that needs to be fixed. There were 505 open tickets. And there's a bit of a breakdown, if you follow the arrow, there's a bit of a breakdown as to how those open tickets are designated. Some related to what is quote unquote defined as a buildings issue. Some would be related to what is being called an assessment, meaning someone needs to come and take a look at it. There's some mold issues, there's some paint issues, there's some heat issues, there's some plumbing issues. Of those 505 open tickets, when we looked at the data, it appeared as though, and again, I'm no expert on this data, and we'd have to ask NYCHA to come and present to tell us the story from their perspective. I'm sure it would be different. But based on the data that we saw, we only saw action on 23 of those 505 tickets, with work, meaning action steps being taken to resolve them, in only 6 cases. The average length of time designated from the time that someone says, I have a problem, to someone taking a look, if it was looked at, was more than 300 days. Now, again, it could be the case that this data is faulty. It could be the case that there's a lot of missing information that just wasn't plugged in. But this might be reflective of what is actually happening in the development. And I suspect the members of the Holmes Isaacs Coalition, who made some choices to be able to file a suit against the city and NYCHA to be able to get repairs done in a more consistent basis, they might say this seems more real than not. So again, this data might not tell the whole story. It's just a snapshot. But based on what we're seeing over the last calendar year alone, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this development that is not being done. Now, I'll just back up for 1 second here to some steps that were taken by residents. The Holmes Isaacs Coalition, there we go. Holmes Isaacs Coalition and Sandrea, if you want to jump in at all here, feel free. In 2019, the Holmes Isaacs Coalition came together to file a lawsuit to demand that NYCHA conduct full roof-to-cellar inspections of the complexes and do repairs to fix all the violations from the housing and building codes. As of March 2021, 15 months later, the tenants came back to court to say that this had not been done, this work had not been taken care of. Sandrea, I know, has some additional detail as to where we are right now and some additional news, I think, to come in terms of the suit itself. But I wanted to share this information sort of to give you a sense of a couple things. First, as a starting point to say, there is public housing in this community district. I think there are some folks who don't think that may be the case. Maybe they're not aware of it. Maybe they don't know how many apartments it is. Maybe they don't know how many people it is. But I think it's important that we talk about that and be aware that this is in our community, and we should be supportive and respecting and engaging with our neighbors across the district, in particular those who live in public housing. Oftentimes it's the Isaacs and Holmes developments that are thought of first, but Robbins Plaza down in 70th Street is also in our district. As noted, these buildings were identified as having serious issues in 2017. But it's interesting to note, as I said, scoring related to the inspections is up and down. And there's some question as to how it's possible those numbers could move as quickly up and down as they have. Once again, that's 2,325 residents, 1,322 units, nearly 50% having a head of household over the age of 62, 70% making below area median income. We talked about the number scores and the physical inspections having some ups and downs, and that being flagged as a concern because what's real and what's not. And of course, when it came to the actual data, look at these numbers in terms of the poor perform. What are we talking about really? Building systems, exterior, the site. We're talking about significant issues with the boilers, the elevators, the roofs, and then what's happening in people's apartments themselves, which resulted in this poor scoring. And finally, as noted, the Holmes Isaacs Coalition has stepped up on behalf of residents to speak and hold the city accountable, hold the NYCHA accountable for fixing these problems. The last note I'm making here is that based on the basic data that I've seen in terms of the number of open tickets, meaning residents saying there are problems in my apartment, there are problems in my development, it's taking a long, long time to address those issues. Could there be more progress on this? Could NYCHA come back and say, your data is faulty, it's actually something different than what you're reporting? Absolutely. I'm just going by what I understand of the specific data in the development. And again, I think I would leave to Holmes Isaacs Coalition members to let me know as to whether or not what they're seeing and experiencing is more related to when the numbers have gone up or the numbers have gone down and what their day-to-day is really like. I'll pause there because that's a lot in and of itself to digest.
Greg, can I ask you something real quick? Oh, sorry, Sandra.
I don't know. Is it time for me to speak? If not,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to take off. I'm going to take off the share here, and if I can.
Okay. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm kind of doing this and
There we
that.
go.
Yeah. So greetings all. I'm Sandra Coleman. I live in public housing. I live in Isaac Houses, but I'm a former resident of Holmes Towers. So I've been in that area for about 30 years. And the residents of Isaac Houses and Holmes Towers filed an HP action lawsuit, which is a housing parts lawsuit, on December 13th of 2019, Friday, December 13th at that. We've had several court cases, the pandemic hit, so they've been virtual court cases, but we have had numerous inspections, several inspections on elevators, boilers, over and over again. We asked for the judge to hold NYCHA in contempt because we have not gotten the results that we desire. We still are living with lack of heat, lack of hot water, inoperable elevators. Our elevators are about 5 to 6 years old, so they're relatively new, and that's problematic. And they have not been held in contempt. So that's one of the problems for us, because we're in this court case for 2 years now, and it looks like they want to kind of dissolve the case, but we still have the issues. So we're hoping that something can derive out of this, not just the repairs we want, but the better living conditions. But I know Greg spoke about how we were listed as the worst development, and yes, that was kind of surprising to a lot of residents. But also, we know that where we live at is prime real estate. So that's another factor why numbers could have been fudged, because there's developments that are much worse than ours, not as clean, not, no heat, no boilers. I mean, literally really suffering. We're suffering too, but there's developments that are suffering worse than us. So why did we make the top is kind of unimaginable, but it makes sense due to privatization, right? The infill proposal in 2015 that was slated for Holmes Towers, which others and myself fought vigorously, and we stopped it, but it took several years. So I would just say, as a resident that resides in public housing, that NYCHA has been notorious for fudging reports, as well as closing tickets, which Greg spoke about, and the work has not been done. Over the decades, NYCHA has mismanaged and has been mismanaged and underfunded. And that's a problem. I recall in 2015, when we were fighting against the infill proposal and requesting funding from our local city, our local state and federal government, we were asking for $2 billion in 2015. The need now is over 40 billion. Now, if you look at that, and then you look at the RAD conversions, which is the rental assistance demonstration program that was implemented under the Obama administration. Once developments go under RAD, they are no longer NYCHA's problem. So the portfolio has shrunk, but the needs are still exacerbated financially and so forth. And I'll close with, we're under a state of emergency under former Governor Cuomo. I believe that was 2018. We got a federal monitorship in 2019. And I will close with, I was at the City Law breakfast with Bart Schwartz, who is the federal monitor. And I asked him a question about why are we allowed to live in these conditions and nothing is being done. No funding, no repairs. I mean, it's literally like we live in a third world country. And we live in one of the richest cities in the world. And Bart Schwartz said that the fact that we receive $30 million a month from HUD, now that's on top of everything else that's giving from, city, state, and the federal government, whatever money they give, but they give $30 million a month. But he said, no one trusts NYCHA. He basically said they don't trust NYCHA. So that's a problem. So we're stuck with people that are not managing things right for us, not caring about us. And it goes up the ranks in government. It starts with the mayor on down. But like I said, to be in a state of emergency and nothing has been really done, then we're really not in a state of emergency. It's just declared, but nothing's really being done because a monitorship, all he can do is implement. Now he can't implement, he can suggest. He does reports and he suggests. And I'll close with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Greg or Andrea, I had a quick question, and Wendy, I see your hand up. Just that dip and then the way it went back up again on the score. So Andrea, I know you mentioned that, excuse me, you had mentioned the privatization attempt. What else was happening around that time? Because it's just so odd. Like the score is high. I mean, it's very just odd. I mean, the rebound is odd, but so's the dip. I don't know what was going on, or is there anything?
I can't honestly tell you because, like I said, the things have remained the same. We did get new elevators in that time period. The infrastructure is bad throughout the city. So, we have leaks. I have a bad bathroom for over 2 years. I was on the city's worst landlord list twice, my bathroom. So it showed it in 2020, and then you get to see it again in 2021, how it is exacerbated. I had inspectors come here from the federal monitors team, which they were retired detectives, and they came to my house, they assessed it. They sat down with the superintendent, Mr. Hartfield, I'll give his name out. They generated a ticket. And guess what? This was in the end of December. Nothing's been done. Nobody's reached out to me. Now, yes, I know I advocate hard for everyone, but I had this bathroom repaired prior and it came back and it's worse. It's because the infrastructure and the leaks. So I really can't tell you why the numbers went up and down or left to right. It has to be some type of something negative, I would say, because we are prime real estate. That's the only thing I could say. Because like I said, there's other developments that are way worse than ours, way worse. I mean, we got it bad, but there's people that have it way worse. So why were we picked as number one? Yeah.
Sorry about that, Wendy. I saw you had your hand up. Didn't mean to jump in there like that.
Thank you. I'm on mute. I'm a mute.
Really, I was applauding the presentation. Both of the presentations, I think they're pretty powerful. I'm getting some wicked feedback, but okay, done. And I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is, what are the restraints? I don't know if you guys know legally, what are the restraints? I'm trying to partner with private industry to be a demo site for the latest, I don't know, Armstrong construction products, whatever it is that will get instant and more robust relief to NYCHA residents. And what were the mechanisms for funding, and where was the snag in getting it to the people who deserve it, need it the most?
Yeah, I think those are both great questions. And I think they're the kind of questions that I don't know if we have the answers to, but I could think today was about, let's try to figure out the list of questions that we have, because I think these are the types of questions I'd want us to answer the next time we get together. Both those questions are absolutely thoughtful and insightful. I'm not sure anyone here has the expertise to answer. So let's try to figure out between now and our next meeting how we can answer them, because those would seem to be vital to thinking about what remediation or restoration or engagement might look like. Wendy, I wish I could tell you. And on that note, I guess what would be interesting is if there are reflections on what the content that you've heard thus far, the floor is open. I think for us as a committee, I think the focus at this point is asking the question, what do we know and what do we want to know? Because if we're going to try to address, and I think we've already addressed a couple things. Why are these, or started to think about a couple things. Why are these numbers going up and down? What's the actual need? We started to talk about the privatization. What happened there? Did that have an influence? And what's the future of that? Then we're hearing about construction opportunities. Are there different models or opportunities that might be considered ahead? Just a couple of the questions that are coming to light. And it seems to me the job of the co-chairs here is to try to figure out how to get people to answer those. So when we reconvene, we can think about the strategies we want the board to take, because to Sandrea's point, the designation of worst, no one wants to hear. And to her point as well, there are challenges across the NYCHA public housing system. But let's face it, regardless, no one should go without heat. No one should go without water. No one should go without repairs that are undone for months and years at a time. So again, let's lay out all the questions and thoughts that we have, and then let's reconvene to figure out how we answer them so we can figure out what our action step is. Rebecca, Ed, is that okay with you guys?
It sounds great. And I was going to say something that came to mind for me hearing about the backlog, the closing of tickets, things that aren't addressed, or what's legally on the books at the state level, at the city level, to force people's hands, be it a time clock for repair, something like that, or the ability to move someone out of a unit and have the city, the state, the federal government, whomever, pay for a hotel, different form of housing when their housing becomes so uninhabitable. You know, I think about in private housing, you know, there's a lot more code enforcement, unfortunately. And just because you live in public housing, you shouldn't be thrown to the wolves, so to speak, and not have that same oversight where you have a city code or you have a state housing code to point to and say, nope, this has to be upkept in a certain way, and the landlord's not fulfilling their responsibility. It's just extra unfortunate because the landlord here is a government entity, which makes it more difficult. It's like the old saying, physician, heal thyself, you know?
And if it's okay with the co-chairs, is it okay if we keep Sandrea unmuted maybe? Because I certainly want to allow her the opportunity to weigh in when she's ready. Mm-hmm. Sandrea, is that okay with you? If you're comfortable with that, I think we just.
Yeah, but if I have any background noise, I would always mute because I just.
Fair enough.
I just wanted to speak to that, what Rebecca was saying, and she's absolutely right and correct. But, you know, we have to look at who's living and residing in public housing. You know, they are BIPOC, people of color, right? At the end of the day. And, you know, our government has failed us for decades, literally. You know, I grew up in public housing. I wasn't always in public housing my full life, but I grew up in public housing. I remember when it was beautiful. I remember when I could walk outside barefooted, when I lived in McKinley houses in the Bronx. I remember when we got a paint job every 3 years. Everything has changed, and it was never designed for the government to fund it, but because they did lessen the requirements for people to get in. And just to be clear, it's an array of incomes in public housing. It's not just people on public assistance. It's people that are working and people that are retired and people on fixed incomes. You know, I worked with NYPD for close to 26 years and I'm medically retired. So now I'm in the retirement bracket, but I'm out on workers' comp. So I'll just put that out there. So I'm still, you know, receiving from the city because until everything is taken care of. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't have to suffer. So there is a systemic part, you know, the racism of public housing. And we also have to look at the white flight that happened many, many years ago when Caucasian people were able to afford to leave public housing and become homeowners, and Black people were left there. And we also have to look at the fact that public housing was segregated throughout the country, right? So, and schools are segregated, right? Another topic still happening to this day. But at the end of the day, there was and I'll stop at this, there was from the DOI, Department of Investigation, I believe, they did a investigation regarding lead paint poisoning. It's about 150, 170 page document. I seen it. I didn't read it all, but I've seen it and I viewed it. And this was under the former chair. They were lying about the lead poisoning, you know, and so forth. And nobody went to jail. She was able to resign. So if we have a system set up with no accountability, then that's why this happens. Because we know any other landlord would be either fined or probably even in jail for willful neglect for what the residents are experiencing throughout these decades. And there's nothing being done. I just wanted to put that out there because that's one of the reasoning that, you know, it's government, it's an authority, but it's ran by the government. And who cares? You know, that's the thing. There's no accountability. So we suffer. All we have to do is go to court. That's all we have is to go to court and protest and do press conferences and stuff like that. But people are suffering and it's unacceptable.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? And this could also be another question because it triggered a thought in me, Sandra, when you were just speaking, if NYCHA officials are subject to qualified immunity, and if changing qualified immunity laws in New York would then give more culpability and force more people's hands, like you're saying that woman was allowed to just resign and people were harmed and nothing happened to her, is looking at qualified immunity on that front different than how people think about it with policing? Is that something that could help public housing long term too?
Of course, but when you look at that, right, what we had it taken care of for with the police, right? But it's our legislators making this helping with this with that. So they don't want to be accountable, to be honest. So that's the problem. So the people really need to, ask for that, because yes, everybody should be, they all should be not protected by the cloak of immunity. Because if you're a bad actor, you are responsible. Nobody's superior, but this is what we are living in, especially oppressed people, right? Or people of color. This is what we're subjected to, that people can walk around with impunity and do what they want to do to people, not just in policing, but in government. And until that changes, if there's no accountability, if you're able to resign, who cares? You got your six, she moves on. The woman moves on. When this other chair is done, he moves on, no matter what kind of ruckus he's caused. There's no accountability. And the federal monitorship or the federal monitor has, like I said, no real teeth in this. He can recommend, but they don't have to adhere, just like the CCRB. They have no real teeth. Civilian Complaint Review Board with the police department, if anybody doesn't know that acronym. Yeah. So
Andrea, I appreciate you opening up the conversation in the history topic that are associated, the systemic racism associated with public housing. I love that you also, I don't love this, I don't mean love in the sense that this is the case, but the white flight element of this, which absolutely is something that is reflective of this particular location and element. I think those are elements that we can't disassociate ourselves from. They're real, and it's about how it is that we reflect on it and how it is we think about what happens next. And Rebecca, you sort of started this by talking about accountability, right? And whether it was a matter of, do we need, the micro level, do we need a time clock to get to repairs, right? Well, who's accountable for those repairs? What happens if they don't get them done? And what happens if the repairs result in people being more harmed? What's the accountability and culpability associated with that? Like, these are all the kinds of things that I would love for us to continue to dig into and pull back the layers on, so that we're as informed as any, community board about what's really happening, what's really happened. And then also from that, we can draw out the threads to say, here are the 3 to 5 things that we insist that our city and state do to address the needs of our neighbors. So I hope that's helpful, just in terms of maybe tying some of those threads together in terms of what we just heard over the last few minutes.
Nicholas, do you have a question?
I guess my question is, like, in the interest of question asking, is to Gregory's point, maybe asking, like, can you explain the process of work orders, for example? I think that NYCHA will have an answer. It's already defined, it's already in code, it's codified, they know what they're doing. And I think that from the other side of it, seeing the scoring, I know that there are ways to improve scores quickly, and it's not that terribly difficult. It's about getting permits and getting things pushed through very quickly. It happens all the time across organizations. It's not unique to NYCHA. So I guess the thing is, like, asking, like, what is this process? And if the perception is from the committee to say, like, we know this process isn't working, so can you demonstrate where it's being lost along the process? Because I think that's where the accountability really comes into play, because NYCHA will come back and say we have a staffing problem, and which is probably not untrue, that we have a staffing problem. But that what's also true, and I think needs to be demonstrated to them, is that there's a universal universal understanding that there's a lack of confidence in NYCHA's ability to run these properties. So if you have a staffing problem and you lack the confidence, we lack confidence in your ability to be able to maintain a property so that the quality of life for people who live here is maintained, then how do we close those gaps? Like, are you saying that you are no longer confident in your ability as well? And I think that's where the probing really needs to go. It's almost granular because they will have an answer for all these things. And so it's like going back to the work order, saying like, okay, this is your process. Where have you seen this succeed in this property? This is the data that we have. Can you please explain the discrepancy in this data? Is it a staffing problem? What have been your efforts? What is your outreach in order for you to get more staffing? Is it because, is it just because of the pandemic, or is it something that you've seen sustained over the last 10 years? And I think, even to be a little nitpicky, we see that 5 work orders have been closed in the last year. Is that the bandwidth of a super, is to only to close 5 work orders? Is the maybe day-to-day tasks, are they being put into the work order system? How is that being documented? And, and so I think it's just really kind of like, I don't want to say like come in with a plan, but like really kind of poking holes in these. And I say like, I've been on the other end of low income housing. I've worked with these, trying to make sure that we're signed off, that we do things. But there gets to a point where you have to be like, no, we just messed up. And I doubt that NYCHA will say that, but I think it's important. Like if we ask these questions on a really granular level, like, who is taking care, like what's being signed off on a day-to-day basis to make sure that it's compliant with the FSD? Who is the FSD? Like, who's maintaining these properties? Who is the super responsible? Like, where is the supervisory breakdown? Is the super responsible for a team? Or is there someone who's maybe external to the community that's supervising, that's not as familiar with the property? How many times is this property manager visiting the property on a monthly basis? Just really kind of getting the details, because I think they can give you a stock answer. I think lots of us can give a stock answer, but I think it's important to say, like, are you really intimate with the details? Like, do you really know what's going on?
I think that's a very helpful set of probing questions and thoughts, cutting across the spectrum. And I think one of the things I want to add and extend to this is to say, can we get to a place where this committee is probing and is thinking about a grant, and then with the community board holding the city and the tenants, the property management, holding them accountable for reporting out on whatever our own key indicators are that we want to hear about. So we can track our own sort of, is this getting better or is this not? Are our residents doing better? Are the tenants, are community members doing better or are they not? And again, to your point, I agree with you entirely on, you can give a lot of stock answers. There's going to be a lot of responses to a lot of questions. I am certain if NYCHA was here, they would tell us all the ways in which everything that I've reported has been resolved, repaired, is incorrect, or otherwise sort of needs to be punted in another direction. And also, I think there's something really interesting about this community board and this committee sort of coming up with its matrix to say, here's how we know that something better is happening here. And I think you pointed to, Nicholas, a lot of different specific probing questions to get there.
Yeah. Can I jump in if it's okay?
Okay with me, Sandra, please.
Okay. Yeah. Just to address some of what I can, what Mr. Nicholas spoke about. NYCHA does not have enough skilled tradesmen. So the carpenters, the plumbing, they have plumbers, but they're more so the maintenance guys, but bricklayers and stuff like that. Like, you have to plasters, all these people that have this skilled trades. Like with a carpenter can be, they might have 1 to maybe a borough or 1 to a certain area. So you would have to wait weeks, maybe even a month or so for that work to be done, when it should be able to be done within a week's time. So that's one of the problems. They have something that's called a compliance unit that has been pretty proactive, that residents are able to work with, but it all stems to where you live at and your property manager and your superintendent. It's on them to make sure these things are done, because that's their job. And they're just not doing their job. A lot of the property managers have that responsibility, but they're not really doing their job. And that's what we're stuck with. The help is not good. It's not the low level workers. I don't want to say low level. That's not even the right way to say, but not the caretakers or the maintenance workers, but the hierarchy, which is the property manager, and they're the supervisors, and they're not actually doing what they should do, because the caretakers and the maintenance workers, they can come, you can get a stoppage repaired, or unstopped, excuse me, in 24 hours, because that's what they need. The snake, right? The snake is on deck. So they done taught the maintenance guys to do that. But when it's something really important, like a door or your apartment door, and you need the carpenter, you literally have to wait. When I was in my old building, they somebody over me, they called 911 for the person. I was at work at that time. The fire department broke my door to try to rescue somebody, but they went to the wrong apartment. So I had to wait for a carpenter, because the way they opened my door. But it took some time, but I had to get a new door. But it wasn't that much, it wasn't like over 2 weeks, but it did take time, because I had to wait for a carpenter to actually put a new metal door on my door. So yeah, that's one of the issues. They're not hiring staff.
I appreciate you flagging that, Sandra, in particular, the skilled trade component of this, which is a set of expertise that is needed to resolve things in the development. There are different costs associated with skilled trades. And I know that adds a complexity to property management and oversight of property. We know that those are issues. We've heard about those, but I appreciate you flagging that, because that adds complexities to this conversation. Just like the complexity of, I have a leak in my, if I have a leak in my apartment and someone comes in, scrapes it, plasters it, repaints it, well, that makes my apartment room look better. But what happens? Why did that leak happen in the first place? Is it associated with my neighbor, or is it associated with the roof, or is it associated with, and this is something that came up during the privatization conversation, is it associated with the piping in the building?
Yeah.
That there are leaks and issues with the piping in the building. So all this to say, I appreciate you sort of flagging the trades category of this, the timing of this, the different skill sets within the development in terms of who does what, because there are complications across the board.
And why are the leaks returning? They keep returning. That's the problem also, because they're not stopping or really identifying the true problem.
That's right.
And that's what we're experiencing too. A lot of leakages in the bathrooms mainly.
And I think that relates back to the designation of these buildings having capital leaks. Perhaps there was some assumption, or at least whatever inspections were happening, we're telling the story to say the problems here are deeper than, well, they're modest repairs. There are physical infrastructure items that need to be rethought. Sorry for jumping in.
You guys, they're fixing the cosmetic problem, but not the fundamental problem underneath.
That's right. That's right. So again, when that goes back to, I think, Nicholas's point about how do we hold folks accountable to addressing both the immediate, can I get an immediate problem solved, versus the length of time it takes? Can the timeline get shorter to resolve problems? To, well, how do we know that the actual institutional or structural problems are being addressed? Because if not for that, we could end up in the same position over and over. This is the complexity of the matrix I think we have to create to be able to be a committee and a community board that holds NYCHA accountable. Again, the floor is open for other thoughts, questions, or other content that we should be exploring as we continue to probe this particular topic.
This is unrelated, but the talk about lack of workforce, I mean, as a workforce labor person, it made me think about job opportunities for people living in public housing. How can we put people to work to increase and expedite repairs, give people good jobs, within, for me, the unionized building trades, but regardless, good jobs. Like, how can we figure out that process? How can we thread that needle through this? Because, it's a circle of life issue. Like, housing crisis, jobs crisis, repair crisis, everything bleeds together.
Yeah, Rebecca's right about that. And sadly, I believe it's under some HUD regulations, they're supposed to do that, and they don't do it. They're supposed to offer these opportunities to residents, and it's not really happening. It's very rare you see a sign and you get notified for OSHA training and stuff like that, different things. But yeah, it's not happening, and it's supposed to be.
I think there are section 3 requirements, but I could be having the number wrong, Sandra.
Yeah, I think it's HUD 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Section 3.
Mhm.
That's another great data point, by the way, is to talk about training and engagement, how many residents are being, and again, there are some challenges with that as well. But again, in terms of accountability, that's another layer. We could say, listen, we want to know on a monthly basis how you're doing in relation to what what you're capable of, in terms of seeking out employment opportunities or opportunities specific to the construction trades and the trades, et cetera.
Yeah.
That could be another great data point. Nicholas has
Right.
again. You want to jump in, Nicholas?
I think to add to the accountability is to say, like, 100 work orders have been open. What follow-up has been done with residents to say, was this completed to your satisfaction? I'll say it's the most annoying part of maintenance, but it's a necessary one. And if, oftentimes I think the response will be, well, they can open up a new work order. And it's like, well, how do you hold accountable to the fact that the previous order wasn't actually completed, that it was just closed? Because that's what happens before inspections. You have an inspection, you start closing out a bunch of work orders that you think you can get away with. And then the only recourse by the tenant is if they are notified electronically that their work order has been closed, is that they have to go back after they've already waited 6 months. So they may wait another 3 months to be like, hey, this still hasn't been addressed. It's been now 9 months. I think that might be helpful.
That's absolutely helpful. I know that there's going to be a lot of, if there are residents who are sharing their thoughts and experiences, there's going to be a lot about timeline of assessment to a problem, to address a problem, work order tickets being open to closed, when they're closed, what the timeline is to do that. I think we should be very interested in those topics. I also know, because we've heard this, and Sandra, I think you've heard this as well. There was some talk at one point in time, and I'm not sure I understand all the details of this, but I think we had also heard at one point in time that tickets can be closed if you're on a floor where there's a particular issue, and if it's a structural issue, if someone can close it at the other end of the hallway as opposed to someone who flagged the issue. We've heard that before relating to heat issues and plumbing issues, which again seems to be very strange considering the person who put in the ticket is the one who sat, Nicholas, as you pointed out, whose satisfaction should really be addressed.
Yeah, you're right.
Other thoughts and reflections, opportunities to probe. Again, I appreciate the feedback and insight. I see Marco's hand is up. Go ahead, Marco.
Good evening. First of all, to use data from HUD or NYCHA, I think it's very hard, especially if you know in the way that they organize their ideas. One and two, the bureaucracy usually is very poor in the knowledge of management. So on the top of that, we have NYCHA, 184,000 people live in NYCHA. So if you compare that one with the cities in the state of New York, NYCHA should be the second city in the entire state. So to manage poorly having the second largest city, obviously this is the consequence of what you described. There is no other way. So if that is the problem, then become the issue of, I'm sorry, I'm a part of the minority. The issue is minority, they want to do management, the minority want to do that. I saw on TV a minority doing management, and one of the residents, a minority, same race, they facing each other. One saying, I do not have service. The management company, which is a minority, they say, oh, we provide service. So who is the liar? The liar, I don't think, is the resident is coming to tell them like that. So the problem is bureaucracy, serious problem. And the only way that you can tackle this problem is to reduce the size of NYCHA. NYCHA, it has to be reduced. $40 billion is a shame. 40 billion of brainless ideas. That's what I said myself when I hear 40 billion. So the issue is, what do you expect? You have a house in stock that have, I think this development was built in 1958. Probably most of the people that wasn't even born in this community were. Not even probably they have half of the age. So what do you expect piping? What do you expect the construction? What do you expect? The construction is aging. And if there is no good understanding for the residents that this is a good way of living in good, especially affordable prices, because you cannot find even that kind of affordability outside of nature. It means the residents, they don't take care of some issues too. So now you have pipings. You said, oh, they come and they fix. And immediately somebody said, you see, this is an opportunity to create jobs for the residents. So you want to put a skilled person to do the job that require very good knowledge in plumbing, for instance. And if you put a skillful person to fix something or to teach something, what do you expect? The consequence will be very hard. You need the best people in the market, in the construction market, to deal this kind of problems. But the bottom line is, what I'm saying is, let's go start make accountable to the senator of New York, Chuck Schumer. He came to the community board, personal himself, nobody invited him. And he said, we have the 40 billion for nature. The question is, where are the 40 billion? Let's go make accountable to him. Let's go say, please give it the 40 billion to fix this problem. He came himself. Nobody asked him that that's the money that we need. He, by himself, alone, he offered to us. He offered the nature residents. Let's go ask them to give the $40 billion. So, by the way, it's in tape. So we can take the tape and we can send the tape to him. So the other issue is, I have a lot of friends over there because I play soccer with all of them. Many, especially Latinos, especially Africans. I play with them because they love this sport. So always I have a chat with them at the end of the game. And then these people, I asked them one day, what happened when Sandy came? Oh, my friend said, no, nobody came out. Why? Because the police was outside. Why? Because nobody knows. I said, what is the reason you didn't go out? No, the police didn't allow to come out. The issue is very simple. This development, homes and assets are within the flooding zone. In the flooding zone, the problem is once you have more than 3 feet high of water, so you have to allow the water coming in and out. And then somebody in a brilliant idea, I mean, I should say then Tu's idea, I think is better. They said, oh, let's go put the new boilers. And they misuse the precious land, which is very expensive in New York City, especially in the Upper East Side. We're talking about the square footage, $400, $500, or $600. So right there, we have an opportunity to explore and build more affordable housing, and probably, and I have a plan that demolish those existing and put it back a brand new buildings, because you cannot fix something that is too old. It will take time, and even that you have skillful workers doing their job, it will be a nightmare to do renovations and people living over there, because construction and living conditions never match each other. They hate each other. Why? Because construction is a mess. Living is good standard of living. So both are positive that never go together. So the issue is we have to create plan for affordable housing, and there is opportunities that we can create with a state. The state, we can participate the $25 billion, but to participate, you need a plan, a concrete plan. You have to sell the idea. You cannot go over there and say, oh, I want to build a Michelamas, or I want to build everything. No, you can't. You got to go with some tangible numbers. And I did some numbers, especially for NYCHA. And it's very hard to maintain a very low income families because even though that the majority of the finance, it will be subsidized, probably 85% will be subsidized. Even in that condition, the rent is very, very high. Why? Because construction is too expensive, especially when you build large developments. And in this case, we have an opportunity to change the use, and that's what is coming the Committee of Zoning and Development. We have to change the use over there from mid density to high density because you have an excellent infrastructure in that area. Not only you have house above ground infrastructure, schools, buses, and underground too. So the main issue when you're talking about flooding is happening is, and they didn't allow the residents to come out, is it happened one biggest problem. Water is never coming above ground, water coming underground. And when water comes underground and they go back, usually they destroy the foundation of those buildings. And this is one of the reasons they don't allow the police to come out, the residents outside. So the issue, it will be more serious if we have a second Sandy, or maybe stronger than Sandy. Let me explain you a little bit. Yes, I was on—
Marco, one more minute, Marco. I see some other
Yes.
hands. Let me give you one more minute.
Finally, I met the attorney who put the lawsuit against the city of New York on December of 2019. When I talked to him, my conversation with him, he said, yes, there are 2,500 complaints. The majority, almost 60%, were elevators complaints. And then the other ones, other problems. So the issue was the elevators. And this is a big main issue, especially for COVID. COVID did create serious problems over there. So to finish, let me say this one. We had to stop thinking that we make accountable. Nobody will be accountable in this system. The only way that we can do that is to present a tangible project and work it out in that direction. And if it doesn't work, that project, there is another project that NYCHA has. I think it's something like a Blue Way, something like that. But the residents are reluctant to accept. I don't know. But I reviewed the project. It was this project from at the micro level. It was excellent. That's the first time that I ever hear something very well. But at the micro level, that is a problem. So I think with that, I will end it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Can I respond quickly, please, if possible?
Feel
Is that
free.
okay?
Yeah, Sandra, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to just get rid of a myth. NYCHA residents, it's not just low income, it's low to moderate income. We have to be really mindful of that because for some reason everyone or people think that it's just low income people in public housing and it's low to moderate income. And we pay 30% of our income, the only true affordable housing, no roommate needed. I'm hearing like about destruction and rebuilding, and that's a form of displacement. And NYCHA just needs to just be funded, period. You know, under these RAD conversions or whatever they're going to do, it has been proven to be harmful to residents. And that's why we are resistant to all of these privatization schemes, because we know better. We know how we have already been treated, and we do not want the privatization schemes. We just want the city, state, and federal government to fund us. And lastly, with the RAD conversions, if anyone knows about the Ocean Bay out in Queens, there was mass evictions. You know, so when we hear these conversions or RAD or any type of displacement, this harms people, and we have a homeless crisis in this city as well as this country. That's it. Thank you.
I appreciate you adding those items, Sandra, to the conversation. I mean, I think there was some really interesting content from Marco specific to resiliency and flooding. We heard that. I think those are critical issues in addition to what you're talking about in relation to the displacement issues that folks talk about. We talk about privatization. You know, I think this thread of you have buildings with significant need. What does it take to fix those problems? And how do you go from, my apartment is repaired to my building is repaired, and how one of those influences the other. And quite frankly, in a neighborhood that is considerably well resourced. And again, Sandra, I also want to appreciate that. Just in general, I think we have to talk about, be as aware as we can be about the realities of public housing. And as you've pointed out on a number of occasions, to just be very thoughtful about who lives there and the reality of the income levels. It's not all one thing, it's not all another. And I think that's really important to think about. And by the way, there aren't a lot of great examples in New York City of where anyone has figured out how to take a development that is challenged physically and ensure that people are cared for and safe in trying to be able to replace, renovate, remediate their spaces, or to ensure that folks who live in those developments have access to resources and job training and skill development to be able to continue to support their growth and development in a construction trade. These are very complicated items. So I want to express my thanks to Marco and Sandrea for talking those items through. We have a couple of hands up, I see. Ed, who's next?
Looks like Boaz. Am I pronouncing that correctly? I apologize if not. And you're up next, but we do see Rita Popper is in the house. We were always happy to see her. I'm gonna let Boaz, you're up, and Rita, you're on deck.
Can you hear me? Perfect.
Indeed.
You said it perfect, better than my mother. So my name is Boaz. I came, born and raised in Israel. I've been all over the world, but I came to New York City in 2012. Been in Upper East Side for the last 10 years. A few really quick comments, and I haven't been in since the beginning of the conversation regarding Upper East Side, and I think this is a debate where Marco was saying, he mentioned a statement that you cannot find a lower rent than what NYCHA provide. That's I assume it's correct, but it's correct only in the Upper East Side. There are cheaper areas in the state, and the question is whether we should help people getting a decent housing, maybe outside of Upper East Side or outside of New York City. That's the reality. I'm not saying, I don't want to push anyone, but I want to put it out there. The second thing I want to say, and I mentioned it in the previous housing committee, is that at least for I'm not an architect. I know that some of you guys have experience, but at least from walking in the street in Upper East Side, there is no place to build new buildings. It's like everything is already built. I mean, we're not going to add more new apartments for a lower income, in my opinion. That's the reality. I think that the game strategy should be on defense, not offensive. And that's going back to Marco, a message about destruction of a building. So not all NYCHA buildings are the same. I've been in for different reasons, but I haven't lived in a NYCHA apartment, but I've been in the actual building. I've been in an apartment. There are actually some buildings that are in excellent condition, and there are some buildings that are in very bad condition. There are some buildings that you get in and you feel unsafe because there are gangs, actually, people drinking next to the elevator and questioning you what you're doing. There's all this security issue. So that's another variable that I want to mention you guys, that maybe we should focus on the buildings that are still in a good condition. Maybe we should focus on them to keep them in that good condition. Regarding the jobs, that's a very good comment, and about NYCHA and the job. People don't understand. Right now there are jobs. I don't know. We need to thank Biden, Trump, but right now there are so many open jobs and so many opportunities. I'm coming from the high tech. I can tell you that every company out there in the high tech are looking for software engineers, people that, to join the high tech industry, but not only high tech. If you look at New York City, someone mentioned about niche. I just went into a New York City job official website, newyorkcity.gov. I pasted in the chat. Plumber helper, a job post that is there since April 2020. Proposed salary range $40 to $45 an hour. No need for any minimum requirement. $45 an hour, guys. This is amazing, and there is basically a priority for niche residents. So I don't know how we can, I don't mind if you guys printed this and I can paste it and I can volunteer and go to a niche building and put it over there, but it's like 5 open position. And if you go, and this is just a filter into the filter. If you search inside the New York City, you'll see hundreds of open position entry level. So that's take me to my last comment, is that one of the things that maybe we need to help is to figure out how to help the people that live in Nicha to get a better income, I don't know, education, help them find a job, opportunities, just an idea. That's it for my end.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your comments, and I just want to reinforce that, NYCHA is not a monolith. The residents are not a monolith. There is a range of experiences, backgrounds, financial situations, income, education levels, and I just think it's always important for us to be mindful of that as we think about this. And when we talk about opportunities, I think we're talking about folks who want access to opportunities. Let's do everything we can to get folks access. For those folks who are doing great, let's keep them doing great. And again, I just want to note that I think it's always important as a committee that we just always sort of reflect on this idea that NYCHA is made up of a lot of parts. It's not a monolith, and that includes income and experience and education and expertise and jobs, and that makes the conversation, interesting and dynamic, and also it compels us to make sure that our neighbors are doing well. I think that's the foundation of this. We want every neighbor to be doing well, and I think that's the purpose of a community board. I see Rita's hand is up.
Really quick, Greg, if I
Oh, sorry, Rebecca. Sorry, yeah, please. Sorry.
Maybe for our next meeting where we continue this conversation, it could be helpful to just open up with like a NYCHA 101. How do they figure out what your rent is based on your salary, to kind of illustrate these points and fill in some information and knowledge that a lot of us just don't have. We may not have these experiences, and I think it will fill in our conversation more so we can be operating in a way that's respectful of tenants, respectful of the process, and how we can come up with a really great solution altogether.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's our new co-chair right there. Thank you, Rebecca. Rita Popper, floor is yours.
I apologize. I completely forgot about the meeting, since the meeting last night went for over 4 hours.
Cool.
And
it's okay.
Couldn't possibly. Stop me if you've heard this before. First of all, I don't know, I finished a book on the Dakota. The Dakota was built in the 1800s, to the end of the 1890, around there. And the reason it was called the Dakota, that it was so far away from Wall Street for that area, that they thought it was Dakota. And what it is that that building is in immaculate repair. We have had, or I have witnessed, that we have paid a lot of people to fix NYCHA. And all we know is that the money disappeared and the work didn't get done. NYCHA buildings are sturdy. NYCHA buildings are good buildings. Their bones are good. But what we really need is to, I think, is to find somebody in this world who is known for success, where he cannot or she cannot even contemplate failure, and have, it's like the Second Avenue subway with Dr. Haran Duchanu. Everybody complained for 10 years. They're not complaining now. So I'd like to see a person, a worldwide person. I'm telling you, that meeting was over 4 hours. Person come in and take one bill, take Stanley Isaac's homes. It's in our district, Washington, our district at first, and have them come in. I am upset about people, or not upset, I am wary when someone says, well, we need $80 billion. Well, maybe we need 100 billion. Maybe we only need 40 billion. I don't love this number being thrown around. I don't trust them. And we have all the information as to why we shouldn't trust anybody who has anything in New York City and that higher up echelon that had anything to do with NYCHA. It was a license to steal money. Where's the money from the lead paint study? We paid for the study. We now know the study was not done. Where is the money? That's one part of my spiel. After 14 years of banging my head against the wall, it has finally dawned on me that my head hurts. I'm slow. I didn't say I was fast. Concurrently, as we're fixing up our affordable housing and making sure that it's affordable for the next generation and affordable for the people who are living there who don't have hot water because the boiler is friggin' old. And NYCHA sends in somebody who doesn't know how to install a boiler. I have that from the New York Times. I will dig it out. I will find it for you, where a reporter from the Times shadowed a repairman, and they're in the basement at NYCHA, and the reporter says to the boiler repairman, "What are you looking for?" And the man turned to him and said, "How should I know? I've never fixed a boiler before." That's where the money goes. When are we going to say it's going to stop? Instead of complaining about it, 14 years, I got a big headache. My next thing is, what will the city look like if we don't have affordable housing? Not next year, not in 5 years, but in 20 years. What is the city going to look like? The reason I ask that, and I want you to know where, I think I've shared it, is what's going on in China. When Mao Zedong said you can only have one child. So everybody obeyed. They only had one child, those who were having children. And now it's 25 years later, and they don't have a workforce. So now they're saying you could have 2 children. But that age group, that 25-year-old age group is saying, wait a second, we don't want to get married. We're not having any children. So you can compute that if we don't have people to drive the bus or the train or the librarians or the teachers, or we don't have, what will we not have in 20 to 25 years if we don't have affordable housing? And we are building there isn't a street, and I have been on most of them today. There isn't a street that there is not construction on. Construction for high-end apartments that are going to be just put aside. The rich people don't, in other countries, they don't want to live there, but they want a safe place to go in case they have to get out of Ukraine. I mean, it happens. So I'm giving up that we're going to build more affordable housing. I think we should take care of our affordable housing. It will be nice to get more affordable housing, but I want to know what's going to happen if we don't have it. And I think that we, as this committee, that we need to investigate that part and bring that to the higher ups and say, wait a second, look at what you're doing right now. This city is being run by developers, whatever a developer wants. And last night, even though it was a forever, Michelle Birnbaum brought up something very true. She said, now they want to have a new configuration for traffic on 3rd Avenue. But all the buildings that are being built, not one of them has a garage, not one. And what it is that the mechanicals, because of flooding, the mechanicals have been lifted up, but it costs more to dig lower. So the developers said, you don't really need it. And then, of course, I have somebody coming in and doing a traffic study. And then along comes somebody who says, we've got to reconfigure 3rd Avenue. We're going to make it down to 4 lanes. I went down 2nd Avenue today, and there is a lane, a bike lane. Then there are 3 lanes for traffic and a bus lane. There was a double parked delivery truck on the left side. There was a double parked delivering truck on the right side. And there were 2 lanes for the entire 2nd Avenue. And I went far. I went down to 60th Street. So I want you to know, everybody could sit. I'm tired of people sitting back in their house, in their offices, and say, what should we do now? And who should we talk to? We've done enough talking. Who can we go to? Who does this kind of study? I don't know, but I certainly want to find out. And if anybody has any suggestions, please, I'll do anything that you want. I don't know where to begin. Help me. Thank you.
Thank-
I didn't come early.
Thanks, Rita. As always, raises some very good issues and some points. Yeah, I mean, I feel your pain on 2nd Avenue. I feel your pain on 1st Avenue going north, just like going south, same thing. Marco, I know you're up. No, Nicholas, I know you're up next. Just a quick point. I think we just posted in the chat for folks an article about building affordable housing and the interplay with the developers and, how things are built. Just for anyone, if they want to take a peek at it. And Nicholas, I know you're up again. So we'll unless somebody else has something else to say, Greg, Rebecca, you don't mind, I guess we kick it over to Nicholas.
Yeah, and I think now that we're in the sort of next round of folks commenting for the second, let's keep it short, tight, thoughts and reactions, and we'll allow for a last call of comments and thoughts, and we'll wrap up for the night. So Nicholas, go ahead. We already got a lot of ground to cover. Nicholas, you're the first one up.
Yeah, I think Miss Rita has a point. It's like we're planning for the second child while the first one is drowning. So I think that part of the accountability that I think should be questioned is also the recertification of income. And I think it's less so about like what revenue is collected, because I think that's minuscule for the NYCHA's budget. They get most of their funding through subsidies. But in dealing with like understanding the infrastructure, who is asking for a certification, who's compiling that information, who's reaching out to residents who have maybe not been in compliance with their recertification, or unaware of the process? How often is it being done? What is the process and our processes really? And I think NYCHA will come back and say residents aren't paying, blah, blah, blah. So where's the breakdown? Are you saying how resident A hasn't recertified? How many times has that resident been contacted within 6 months? My guess is they probably haven't been contacted in several years. So I think that would be a kind of to better understand that, again, NYCHA has a process for recertifying income. How well that's implemented and who's actually doing it, I think is the interesting question.
It's a great addition to the conversation is the research conversation, which we've heard a lot about over time. And just as a provider in the neighborhood, we've supported people with the recertification process. It is complicated. There are lots of questions. It changes, and that is particularly challenging. So I appreciate you flagging that. Marco?
Thank you. I had to clarify some issues. First of all, if you compare Dakota with affordable housing, it has nothing to do. Dakota was created for people of high income. Dakota basically the name was created with the idea of to oppose the Upper East Side. If you read history in the Upper East Side came with the price of the land 4 times higher. And the developer, they didn't want to go to the Upper West Side because the Upper East Side was in the West Side. They tried even to put the streets on the name of the West Side of the country. And that is where you have Columbus, they have all these kind of names. And Dakota was far away from the Upper East Side, obviously it was in that place, but was created for middle and high income. So this is what well-qualified building versus the NYCHA. NYCHA was created for affordable housing. It was specifically designed. Their bonds, probably some of the buildings, yes, but the bonds right now located in a flooding area is a disaster. Very soon, if you come in another Sandy, one of the buildings either coming settling down or tilt, and that the structure will become completely compromised and become unsafe. So, and this is why the only way to resolve, especially this development, it is required to demolish those buildings and put a new buildings with the condition to maintain the existing residents, regardless whatever the situation is, except if there is a court order that the resident has to be evicted. Otherwise, all the residents should be maintained in these developments. And you hear very well the complaint, the residents, they said, plumbing is a problem. They've come and they fix, and then they appear again. Obviously, it's aging, and those buildings like Dakota are millionaires. Are those people that put a lot of money in the replacement of the bonds. So you cannot compare that part. And the bottom line right here is, I'm going to finish saying that NYCHA is too big. 185,000 families of people, whatever you want to say, is too big. Is the third largest city in the state of New York. You cannot manage that part. It has to be reduced the size in some way or the other, but you have to go in that direction. You cannot go to check the income, all this kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, the NYCHA is too big, almost impossible to resolve this problem. And the only way is reduce the size of NYCHA. Thank you.
Rita?
I would like to just say one thing. Marco, I know about the Dakota, and it was made for rich people at that time, but it was made in 1890 and it was kept up. NYCHA, our buildings right here are about 50 and 55 years old, but they haven't been kept up. And if the Dakota wasn't kept up, the Dakota would look like NYCHA. And that's what I'm talking about. I can tell you who the families were who moved into the Dakota. There was an entire book called The Dakota. I understand that. I'm trying to say that old can be made new and can be kept. And that there's workmanship in NYCHA buildings that don't exist in our buildings. They don't exist because of the materials or whatever. So I just want to say that nobody has kept up NYCHA. It has been a license to steal, but nobody went to jail because it was a white collar crime. And that's what hurts. And about recertification, every Mitchell-Lama resident had to fill out a recertification, which is 30% of your adjusted gross income. And Greg, there aren't that many pages. I have helped all of the tenants in my building. There are pages that don't apply to you, whether you want to have somebody move in, or you want to have somebody out, or you're paying alimony, or you're paying child support. That doesn't apply to everybody. So everybody's packet is different, but everybody looks at it. It's about 15 pages. They look at it and they freeze because it's 15 pages. It's not that complicated. And as Sandrea said, she pays 30% of her adjusted gross income. That's what it is. There are not millionaires living in NYCHA. That's not where our problem is. The problem is making NYCHA livable for everybody, and also what happens if we don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. And
I'm glad I'm not passionate, because you should see me when I'm really passionate.
I also had a fun fact. I think they named the Dakota after the Dakotas because it was so far north in Manhattan in the 1800s, correct?
Right. That's why it was named the Dakota.
Yep.
And
You also
very few people wanted to live there, and it was like they had full floors, and it was like a home, a single story home. But nobody wanted to live there because it was too far away. You know, to go to the grocery store from the Dakota with your horse and carriage, it was a few days. So it was, but it was kept up. It was pristine, not because the people who live there cared, and the people who live there made sure. Poor people care just as much as rich people, but they don't have the opportunity to say to somebody, you did a lousy job on that boiler. Go and do it again. Now it's at your expense. That's what we don't have. And we have people, I'm sure that there are people in Ukraine right now who would love to come here, and I bet you they know how to fix a boiler because that's what they have in their old buildings. So it's there. We could spend your whole life talking about it. But what will happen if we don't do it? Not tomorrow, immediately. Thank you.
Can I say one quick thing, please? I'm sorry. Miss Rita, thank you for talking about the research, but I just want to say, as a former payroll supervisor with NYPD, I had to fill out the income verification forms for people for their research. And the research for Mitchell-Lamas and NYCHA is almost identical. I just wanted to share that.
would it maybe be helpful if the community board did like a clinic on recertifying at some point? I don't have experience with this, but just throwing it out there to the group, if it's a 15-page document and people get sticker shock seeing it, maybe just having someone come in and offer a guiding hand or debunk, answer some questions. Maybe, I don't know if that will be helpful.
I will volunteer I have been doing this. I have lived in this building for 46 years. I have been doing it for 46 years. And as Andrea says, they are almost the same. The only thing is you have to bring proof of what your income is. You have to bring how much money that you have that you could put your hands on. That's checking account and savings account. And it's not your IRS. It's not your pension fund because you can't put your hand on it. So it takes a little while. I am volunteering. I can do them in my sleep. I only did a few just last week because SPD has been doing it on a very slow rolling basis. But that's not what's keeping NYCHA in disrepair. No.
It's just something to offer tenant support, while people are struggling with that. But thank you for volunteering. As co-chairs, we'll discuss, we'll find a date, we'll get together and see what works.
Count me in, kid.
Yeah. And Isaac Center does a great job for the residents. They do. And the NYCHA office has a kiosk as well, because it's not just a booklet. You get a booklet if you request a booklet. It's online now, but some people just want to use the booklet, or it's just difficult for them. But yeah, but the Isaac Center does let you make appointments, and they do help us, our seasoned residents, for sure. Thank you.
Great.
Well, I think we covered the ground on NYCHA this evening. I don't know if there's any old or new business. Anybody want to add anything in that regard? If not, I think we would need a motion to adjourn for the evening. I see a thumbs up.
A second. Second.
Second.
Your hand. On that note, I think we can close for this evening. We got a lot of work to do between now and our next meeting, and a lot of questions to answer, a lot of thoughts to think hard about, and some opportunities, like has been said, to offer some possibilities for clinics and other gatherings. But I think the work has just begun, and I'm very grateful for everyone's attention and patience and engagement this evening, because this work, there's a lot ahead. So let's continue to stay focused. Ed, Rebecca, anything to add?
All good. Nice meeting.
Yeah, great meeting. I loved how everyone added something to the conversation. We've come to a collaborative space for April. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. I'm very happy to have my new co-chairs. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
great
Have a good weekend.